Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this workshop. Let us take a few minutes so that people can join. Good morning, good afternoon again. I see already 13 people are here with us, so I will just start slowly. Again, welcome to this workshop on driving effective collaboration action with private sector. I'm Greta Ellero, Program Associate Coordinator with UNDP, the Food and Agriculture Commodity Systems team, and I will be your facilitator today. Let me just give the floor to my colleague Cristina so that she can introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Greta. Good morning, good afternoon. Really good to see you all here today. My name is Christina Archer. I work with Greta in the Food and Agriculture Commodity Systems team at UNDP as the Senior Private Sector Advisor. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you again all for joining us. We are really thrilled to see you all here, ready to embark on this journey of discovery together. Please share your name, role, and location in the chat box if you would like. So today we are going to explore practical approaches and share some tools developed by UNDP to support practitioners engaged in convening private sector actors. So thank you, Alejandra, for sharing the agenda. So today we will first have a brief overview of what does it mean effective collaborative action and how is this linked to private sector. So then we will discuss how is the private sector relevant to your work, in particular FOLUR and SECO projects. We will walk you through the 3-day deep dive workshops on private sector engagement that we offer to FOLUR and SECO project teams. And then we will discuss how do you see this program helping you. And then there will be also space for your questions and further clarifications if needed. So I just want to remind you that this is a discovery session, so it's a 60-minute workshop, while more in-depth sessions will be offered, again, as I mentioned, to FOLUR and SECO country project teams to develop or fine-tune your private sector engagement strategies. But before we dive into the substance of our session, let's take a moment to thank the FEX community that is behind the organization of this event and will continue to support you in the follow-up actions. If you aren't a member yet, my colleagues Alexandra and Alejandra will post in the chat the instructions to become a member. Lastly, I would like to remind you that this is a safe space. We want everyone to feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, opinions, concerns openly and honestly. So respectful listening, constructive feedback and empathy will be our guiding principles throughout our interactions. So without further ado, let's dive in and we will start with a poll. So Alejandra, if you can kindly share on screen the poll, you will have 3 questions that will help us understand your current engagement, if any, with the private sector. So the first question is, how important do you believe private sector engagement in collaborative spaces is for achieving sustainable agriculture production? We won't see the results immediately, but you need to answer all the 3 questions. how confident are you in your organization's ability to engage with the private sector in collaborative initiatives? And the third question is, what are the challenges that you face when engaging with the private sector? So, how important do you believe that private sector engagement is for achieving sustainable agriculture production? So far, most of you agree that it's very important engaging with the private sector. Let's take a couple of more minutes to receive your answers.
Please do take a minute to look at the poll, because it's helping us understand what you need, and so we can tailor this session and the following ones accordingly. So that's very quick, and yeah, we think about half of you have participated, so please take a moment, as Greta says, because we're here to do this with you, so help us shape it for your needs.
One more minute and then we will close the poll.
Greta, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm Michael from Kaleka. So how we know that we submitted properly? How do we know that
Alejandra,
we?
would you...
Hi, Michael. The thing is, this is anonymous, so I cannot tell
Oh,
you
okay.
exactly
Okay.
if yours has been correctly submitted, but I know the amount of people who have
Okay.
submitted
Okay.
it so far.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yeah, maybe we can close and see the results. Good. So most of you agree that the private sector is an important actor to engage in achieving sustainable agriculture production. How confident are you? Half of the replies tell us that most of you are quite confident in engaging with the private sector. Some are already very confident. In terms of what are the challenges, Alejandra, is there the possibility to see the replies, because it's an open question? If not, maybe we will see later.
Great, I think it's best to say later because I need to reload the Zoom. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. As Cristina mentioned, this is really a pool for us so that we can design the deep dives according to your needs. So now I will pass the floor to Cristina. She will now explain you a little bit more about effective collaborative action and how this is related to private sector engagement. Cristina, over to you.
Thank you, Greta, and thank you to all of you who are joining us, continuing to join us. Please do keep putting your name and where you're calling from today in the chat, so you can all get to know each other, have a look, see who else is here, and if there's somebody working in a similar space to you, then reach out to them. This is also an opportunity for us, even virtually, to network. As Greta said, and as we've mentioned quite a few times, UNDP, it really believes very strongly in collaboration. As the UN agency that is the integrator and holder of the SDGs, we believe that collaboration is the only way really to achieve this. But what has it got to do with the private sector? Well, that's what we want to look at today. Some of you who are on the call and are long-time members of the FACS community may already have taken part in a previous session. We had one last year explaining the flagship methodology that UNDP has for effective collaboration for action. We are also planning new sessions for those of you who have recently joined the community to again have an introduction to what is it, what makes this different to other methodologies that are there. But let's just have a quick recap. Next slide, please, Alejandra. All of you, from what I've seen in the chat, are in one way or another working in agriculture, on agricultural systems, on food systems. So you don't need reminding, but it is always good to have a quick moment to pause and reflect. Why are we all working in food and agriculture? And for us, why is UNDP working in this space? Of course, like we know that agriculture has huge impacts on the environment, both on use of fresh water, for example, a contributor to deforestation, biodiversity loss, etc. It also impacts on employment opportunities, labor, human rights in labor, labor abuses in some of the supply chains as well. Many people living and working in agriculture are living on or below poverty lines and not making living incomes. But we know this is an absolutely key sector that we need to get right. It can be a driver for significant change. It is absolutely fundamental to transform food and agriculture commodity systems in order to achieve all of the SDGs. So it is really important. And the private sector is an absolutely key part to try to achieve these systemic changes that we know are needed to transform agricultural sector. Next slide, please. So we know there's an issue. All of us here on the call today, in one way or another, are working on food and agriculture. So to try and progress and to achieve the changes we need, there's a lot of talk about collaboration. We need to collaborate. Of course we do. We've been working on collaboration, all of us, all of you have in one way or another been involved in collaboration over the many years that I'm sure you've been working in this sector. But why are we not achieving the change that we need? Why are we not achieving the step change and the speed of action that is required? We feel that is because the collaboration that has been done really needs to be targeted, to be a bit more effective, to be more directed towards action. So we refined some of the many existing methodologies there are on collaboration and convening, and a few years ago launched that effective collaborative action methodology, which, as I said, there will be further introductions to over the course of the next few months. It's really looking at how can we collaborate with more impact, more deeply. How do we find more effective ways together in order to bring about change? Not just coming together to say we've collaborated, we've been to a meeting, but really in a way that is substantially shifting the way that things are done. So how do we do that together? How do we take a moment to understand the system that we're working in together with the other stakeholders? We can't do any of this alone. That is well known. No one government, no one company. So we need to be fostering that more effective collaboration with all of these stakeholders. So this is the reason why we wanted to take a moment to reflect on how and why we should be collaborating more effectively. But what does that look like in practice? Next slide, please, Alejandra. I know this is a lot of information here, so don't worry, we don't need to go through it in detail. In the chat, there will be a link that will take you to our website that has the whole guide there. And as I said, in the next few weeks, look out for an invitation from the FACS community for a discovery session on effective collaboration for action. But, you know, basically, as I sort of said earlier, it is a way of helping national and international stakeholders in country at a subnational level or at a national level come together in order to, you know, work more effectively together to bring about step changes that are needed. And to do that, we base it on 4 key building blocks. Again, some of these will be familiar to you because they are drawing on many years of experience of different organizations on how to collaborate. But first building block, of course, is to truly understand the system that you are working in. And the system language, I know, is new for some, and there's a lot of guidance we provide on that. Co-creating the approach, so coming in with an open mind to listen to other points of view, what needs to happen, how can we do that, and what should our approach be? And it may not be the one that we thought when we came into it. So how do we do that together so it is co-owned as well? And that then gives us the space to develop a plan, if you like, that then is owned by everybody, that then we can all act within. And this is really important for the next few steps we're going to be discussing on private sector. So how can we be taking more collaborative action in partnership with other actors, including the private sector? And throughout, of course, really making sure that we learn and adapt, because things always change, shocks always hit us, and we need to be learning and adapting from that. So those are the building blocks. And then, of course, we have, you know, key principles. Again, some of these won't necessarily be new, but actually putting emphasis on them we have found to be quite transformative. How do you work with power? How do you work in a more participatory way? How do we identify and work through conflict whenever you have a diverse group of stakeholders together with very diverse points of view? And this is what we hear about the private sector very often. We know there will be imbalances. We know there may be conflict. That will not be a constructive way of collaborating. So how can you tackle that from the beginning? How do we find a way of identifying these actions we can take together with other stakeholders and jointly invest in them? How do we communicate together effectively when our objectives and needs are very different? So these all are principles which will be covered in more detail in the sessions that our colleagues will do in a few months, as I said. But what we're taking from this is collaboration is with many different stakeholders. One of these key stakeholders is the private sector, and that is what we're going to be focusing on today. I think I'll stop there on effective collaboration. Just to check if we had any key questions in the chat, Greta, on ECA, or shall we move on?
Yes.
I think we can move on.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. So that was just a quick recap on why we're here today. We know we need to collaborate in order to achieve the objectives of our programs, of our projects. We hope we can support you to do that in a way that will bring about more impact. One of the main actors that we have in these spaces that we're working with is the private sector, and we are hoping to work with you to do that in a more effective way. As Greta mentioned at the beginning, a key focus of our work over the last few years has been working on the FOLUR program, or with the FOLUR program, as part of the FOLUR program, food and land use restoration, GEF-funded work. And a quick snapshot, and I hope many of you on the call today are indeed working with these teams and these country projects. A quick snapshot that we've been doing over the last year or so shows that all of you, so all of these programs, are in some way or another hoping to work with the private sector. Different commodities, yes, but all of them, either at a national or subnational or landscape level, have identified that working with the private sector in some way is essential and is a key part to achieving the objectives. In Burundi, for example, it's been identified that it's absolutely key to bring the private sector in to the coffee work that's being done there in order to think about investments in landscape planning, support for restoration, the sustainable practices that are needed, and improvements of livelihoods. How do we look at the certification of these value chains there, and how do we improve the producer and buyer exchanges? Involving the private sector in terms of improving and increasing the financing for smallholders or others in the value chain, improving the provision of farmer support services for good agricultural practices is something that's key through most of these programs. How do you mobilize a private sector? In Ghana, for example, again, identified there that mobilizing the private sector for the cocoa within cocoa is absolutely vital in order to support collective action on forest protection and restoration and farmer livelihoods. In Guatemala, for the coffee and livelihoods sector, again, how do we improve and increase collaboration between private sector and the other actors? In Indonesia as well. So all of these countries, and if we go to the next slide, please. Again, we know in some way or another are working with the private sector. Sometimes the focus is on smallholder value chains, sometimes bigger agribusiness. In all cases, we know there is private sector involvement in this, and they are essential to bring into this program in a way that will help us deliver our objectives. I think we'll go on to the next slide, please. So it's just to give an overview that we know you're all working with the private sector. I think on the call today, we actually have some members of the private sector as well. So great to have you with us. It's a good example of working together. So going back to the quick introduction I gave on effective collaboration for action, what does that look like for the private sector specifically? So today we're just going to introduce to you a series that Greta and I have developed that we would like to share with you in the coming weeks and months for those who really want to dive deeper into this and really get kind of a step up onto how you can engage the private sector. As you said in the poll, most of you are quite comfortable with it and quite familiar. So it'd be great to bring you in. You can share your experiences with others who maybe are feeling a bit newer to this or would like some support. But what we, based on working with the private sector for many years and with country teams and understanding their needs, the program that we developed helps you to identify and map, so understanding the system, who are the private sector actors that we have here in our landscape, in the system. And you may think you know who those are, but this really does challenge you to think more broadly. The definition of private sector is quite broad. It's not just the big multinational companies that we may think of to begin with. It also includes national private sector, finance institutions, producer groups, even the media. You know, who do we need to bring into this collaboration space we're working in order to achieve our objectives? So it really tests us to think much more broadly, much more systemically, in order to get a really big overview of who are the private sectors here. That will inevitably bring a massive list. In similar processes we've done before, we've identified maybe 200-300 private sector actors. It's a great exercise to do with your partners in your collaboration space, because you suddenly start seeing how broad and big your system is, but we can't necessarily work with all of them and not in the same way. So how do we then start prioritizing and also understanding each one? So some of them are going to be supportive of the work that we're doing, others not so much. So segmenting and prioritizing these private sector actors to then really hone in on who do we need to focus and how, and then for each one of those prioritized ones, really developing a very tailored engagement plan. And maybe I think we've got a little bit more detail if we go on to the next slide, and I can continue explaining the process a bit more. So we'll, in the deep dive sessions that will take place in the next few months, this is just an introduction to what we will be covering. The journey that we'll go on with you will be to really help you think again about what are your program or project focus areas and objectives. What are you trying to achieve? And what role does the private sector play in that? Again, with a really broad view of that definition of private sector, from national and small and medium enterprises all the way through to multinationals and the broader group. So who are they, and how might they be impacting the objectives we're trying to achieve here? But then also take a moment to reflect. So what in your program, what is being offered, but then also what is needed? We feel we're strong on private sector, but maybe we need support on this area, or we see opportunities arising to bring the private sector in. So just a moment to reflect very specifically on your work with private sector. As I mentioned earlier, then with partners, crowdsourcing in that view of who is the universe of our private sector actors, and really, really thinking outside of the traditional box of who we think this is. And yes, many times we may be surprised as to who comes in there, but really, bringing in that wider perspective before we then, work together to prioritize and develop the archetypes. And we say this is a very important step because not all private sector actors are the same, and even within similar groupings, let's say a finance institution, a coffee trader, a producer group, some will be very supportive to the work we're doing, will already be champions, they're influencers, they're thought leaders. Others are resistant to what we're trying to do. They don't care about sustainable agricultural production. In fact, they're against it. You can't work with those organizations in the same way. So we need to find out who the differences between them, and then be able to develop a specific tailored plan for each one of those. The way you will deal with an engagement strategy you could have with a supporter and a champion of what we're doing is going to be very different to an organization that is putting up barriers and can be a very substantial block. So how do we do that, thinking about how we tackle each one in that more tailored way? With UNDP, and I'm sure many of your organizations as well, there is risk screening, and we do need to look at who these, especially for the private sector, to look at whether we can work with them. So some risk screening criteria is examined there, but that is for you in your group as well to review and refine. And constantly, as we said before, we're learning and we're adapting. So, reviewing where have we got to, does this kind of feel about right? We said we needed help with this. We thought we were strong in this. Can we adapt in some way? And then the key bit really for, as I mentioned earlier, is doing these tailored engagement plans, which will help us identify for those priority private sector actors very specific ways of working with them and expectations of what we feel they will bring to achieving the objectives for our program, which of course we will be reviewing. Sorry, can we, just to finish off the flow, we're always, of course, reviewing this, and that is part of the feedback loop that we have, developing action plans and then implementing. So we'll cover all of these with you, those of you that sign up in the deep dives. Next slide, please. So we call them deep dives because this today is just a discovery session to explain a bit about the offer of the deep dive sessions. We would like those of you who really want to devote time to understanding and working on this issue in more detail. We are not setting up a webinar that you can come and listen to in the background. These are going to be very hands-on. They are very participatory. They will be in total 6 hours over a few weeks, not all in the same week. So we have condensed all of the steps I have outlined before into 3 sessions. Each one will be 2 hours, and we will be setting dates in the coming weeks. The format will be that you will normally have a little bit of homework to do before and after each session. So taking some of the tools that I've outlined and then applying them to your work. So looking at a stakeholder map, taking it back to your team, your program, starting to fill it in, and coming back to the session with that. We will have drop-in clinics. So if you're doing the SWOT analysis, doing an engagement plan, and you're not sure whether it's going right, or you'd like some feedback, Greta and I will have an open session where you can just drop in if you want to discuss this with us. So we're there as support. And during and after the 3 sessions as well, it is obviously, reflecting and taking this back to apply with your program, with your team, with your partners. So everything that you've learned, we do expect you to commit to taking that forward, and we'll be working with you 6 months after the events as well to just reflect on how did it go, do you need more support in anything? So it is a mentoring process as well, in a way. So please don't sign up if you just want a 1-hour webinar in the background while you're doing other emails. Please sign up if you really want to and you see the value in engaging more effectively and in a much deeper way with the private sector for your programs. Next slide, please. So we've covered some of this before, but just as a recap, we have a range of tools that we'll be sharing with you. We have private sector guidance notes, toolkits that have been developed. For example, our Value Beyond Value Chains toolkit, which really gives you very concrete examples and further tools about how to engage with the private sector, how to make the case to them to also come into the collaboration spaces that you are setting up and managing, or into the project and programs that you are running. So how to sort of show them the value of doing that, because it does make business sense. Our Effective Collaboration Action Toolkit has specific modules but focusing on the private sector, and all of those we will be working with you throughout the sessions. Next slide, please. Just to show you, this is an example of some of the tools that we worked on with our colleagues in Peru. As I said, we had the SWOT analysis, which took a good couple of hours with a team there to really go into detail about what have we done. The team in Peru have worked on coffee, cocoa, and palm with the private sector for a very long time. So they are coming from a strong position, but still they found ways by going through these exercises. Why weren't some companies coming into this? We hadn't considered finance institutions or other actors. So it really made them reflect and think about how to make it more effective. In mapping out the palm oil supply chain, they found lots of actors they hadn't considered before in seeing it in this broader and more systemic way. The example here, which surprised everyone, was it was very important to bring the media, to work with media companies, because they are the ones who transmit messages, radio spots, information on markets to smallholder farmers. So absolutely key actor to work with that hadn't been thought of before, and actually was quite an unlock for getting take up of good agricultural practices. So again, these tools will help you think more broadly of who you need to work with. And the tool I've mentioned 2 or 3 times now about how do we start having sort of typologies and archetypes and understanding who the stakeholders are we're working with and where they sit within these boxes. The champions that can, help us bring along others, those who we know are supportive anyway and can work with us. Some who are marginal, we just need to keep informed. Maybe we won't have as deep an engagement policy with them. But really, paying attention to who is unsupportive or reluctant that are absolutely vital and could be actually putting barriers up into what we're trying to do. Doesn't mean we won't engage with them. It just means we need to engage with them in a different way. And again, in Peru, it was interesting to identify where everybody sat here, and it helped the team really think of the private sector in this very differentiated and tailored way, which they found very helpful. Next slide, please. I've covered these points a little bit through the presentation, but it is worth again noting. As I showed in the first few slides, in pretty much every project and program proposal and action plan, we see the private sector is mentioned. You all have identified working with the private sector is important. It is, but we must also do this in a way that is effective. So not just tokenistic, we need to really take this seriously so we don't undermine some of the great work that we're doing. I mean, we know there are, so the risks, if you like, to not be doing it effectively is that we will continue to have slow progress. We maybe won't have as much innovation as is needed to achieve the step change in transformation that we're looking at. There will continue to be a lack of accountability and transparency, something we hear about very often with the private sector. Huge missed opportunities because we know that they can bring in a lot of funding and unlock further opportunities as well. I mean, most importantly, of course, like we will still then continue to have fragmented efforts. There's some amazing examples of private sector success with investments in value chains, but if they just remain in their value chains, we're not lifting the sector up as a whole and bringing about impact for the wider group. So how do we bring them in to avoid this fragmentation and lack of coordination? I think we know about reputational risk and loss of trust, but last slide, please. I think we're nearing the end. So that is the end of me talking out to you. Apologies, it was a bit longer than planned, a bit of repetition there, but also, quite good to lay out what we are going to be presenting in our deep dive sessions coming up. I just want to now take 2 minutes where in silence, you can just reflect on what we've discussed, what I've presented, and please take a moment in the chat to just jot down, how would you see this helping you? So you're working in Papua New Guinea, you're working in Indonesia, you're working with coffee or palm in a multi-stakeholder group. Maybe you're already working with the private sector. Just jot down some thoughts about how would this help you, or maybe how would you like it to see this helping you? And this will help us shape the deep dive sessions to meet your needs. So we'll just have 2 minutes now, and please jot it down in the chat. I hope you've had time to reflect. I don't see anybody yet writing in the chat. So if you could now please put some thoughts down. Are you working in coffee? Are you working in wheat? With cattle? Which commodity are you working in? And how is the private sector engaged in that work? So how can what we've just outlined help you deepen that collaboration with the private sector? Please just put a couple of thoughts down in the chat to share with us. Thank you for those who are sharing their thoughts. Elio, would you like to, it's a great comment you put in the chat. Would you like to maybe share it so you can say it to the group? We can hear you read it out. And remind us, Elio, where you're based and which commodities you're working in, please. Elio Doa, are you still there?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elio.
Greetings from Papua New Guinea. Elio Doa here. I'm working in the cocoa and oil palm space. I've got a little background on market systems analysis, market systems mapping, and I'm keen to know more about how this process would differ or would add on to what I know. And the tools, as I've mentioned, how it can be utilized in the process of assessing the stakeholders, the chain, the supply chain, and appreciating the stakeholders in that space for an effective collaboration.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I mean, as having worked in the cocoa sector in other countries, as you said in your note, it is a crowded space. There are many actors. So how do we make them interested in the work we're doing? How do we support people to work more collaboratively together? So the effective collaboration for action discovery and deep dive sessions that are going to be coming will help with that general piece about how do you get a group to collaborate more effectively. And then specifically to your points around bringing in the private sector as well, as you say, you already have some experience, you've done market mappings and so on. So this will build on that, not replace it, to help you really hone in and think very strategically about how to work with the different types of private sector actors that you will identify. And we really look forward to working with you on this and having your experience help shape and improve the work that we're doing. Is anybody else on the call also working in the cocoa sector that would like to share any reflections on working with the private sector in cocoa and how these tools or the deep dives might support you? I can't see everybody here, but anybody from the Indonesia programs or others from Papua New Guinea working on cocoa? No, maybe not. I see a few coffee actors here, so that's one commodity. Barakala, Robin from Earthworm Foundation, interesting to hear about your work across many commodities, and thank you for sharing the comment that we do need to invest a bit more to build the relationships. As you say, it's a very good point. Very often we overlook that, but building relationships is absolutely key. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Chris Brett.
Yeah, hi, greetings. Hope you can hear me okay. I just wanted to share that, under the FOLUR program, which obviously I co-lead that, and many of you are, good friends and well connected. I just want to share that we got some very good emerging examples of private sector engagement that we've been doing with our core partners. Obviously we've got UNDP here, but I just wanted to share that with the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, we're leveraging quite a lot of private sector investment through their clients and FOLUR. So one really good example is that we decided to work with Nespresso in Uganda, where they were doing a big regeneration area under agroforestry of coffee, and that's coming together really well. We got shade, good shade trees developed, so it's giving a good climate or climate mitigation under the humidity that it builds under the shade. And also there's a lot of composting happening, with the leaves that come down as well. So there's a good system there. And we're also now exploring that, our goal is really to incentivize farmers, to adopt new practices, but also to financially reward them as well. And we're trying now to work out how do we put in a carbon payment for the agroforestry model. And that's something that, we've been looking at across the World Bank, and we are doing it in cocoa at the moment in the cocoa landscapes in Cote d'Ivoire, where we put up a $25 million fund to incentivize farmer change and to connect the private sector banking and funds into the carbon space. So we've got some good examples, and the Nespresso example in Uganda is going well, and we're looking to transfer that to other FOLUR countries, but also to other countries as well, because FOLUR isn't just about the countries, it's about learning and getting it across to other value chains. So we've got quite a lot of examples emerging, across the portfolio. Soft Commodities Forum in Brazil, we've been working out with quite a lot of the large companies, supporting them on their work on the Roundtable Sustainable Soy and connecting them to markets, and also connecting medium enterprises in Brazil, which are still very large compared to others, but connecting them to those value chains as well. So that ripple effect of trying to have change. So lots of examples, but I'll stop there. But thanks very much, Christine. It's a really good session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and apologies for not mentioning it earlier, but I think the point you raise is a very good reminder that the community that we have here, and also with the FOLUR program, a key part is learning across, so sharing between the different countries and sectors. So what we cover today in this session and the deep dives are how do we help you in the country programs strengthen the way that you work with the private sector, but hopefully with a view to that, then feeding up through your national teams to the global platforms, the FACTS community, and interaction with your peers to help share some of that. What is working in how we are working with the private sector? And some of it, as Chris was explaining, is showing how we bring them into spaces. It does unlock investments in many cases, as Chris was explaining, but there's also that how did we get a company like Nespresso interested in what we're doing, and why were they the best partner to choose for this kind of work? And that's what we'll be looking at in our deep dives. I don't see any other hands up for now or other chats. So with that, I'll hand over to Greta.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you all for listening to our presentations. Now, let's take the last poll that we have. No, actually, it's a survey where you will have the chance to let us know how was, in your opinion, this discovery session, and you will also have the chance to sign up to these discovery sessions that we will deliver in the next weeks and throughout the year. So Alejandra, if you can kindly put in the chat the link to the survey.
Greta, just to mention, the survey will appear once everyone is out from the Zoom meeting. So it's an automatic survey that will appear on everyone's screen. There's no link to it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Alexandra, for the reminder. So now, if there are no further questions, I will then close the session, but really invite you to look at the survey, and really please sign if you are interested in joining the discovery sessions. If you have any issue in signing through the link that you will receive, feel free to write to us, to reach out to us directly. Okay, then I will now close the session. Thank you all for participating, and looking forward to collaborating on private sector engagement. Thank you.
Thank you.